This is Larry Lawton, and he's an ex-jewel thief. Larry's a former career criminal, once considered the biggest jewel thief in the United States.
All right, everybody, here we go. Chapter 1 of Gangster Redemption, the book. This is Who Wants to Fuck Miss Armelino, and this is my childhood, and I'm starting this chapter so everybody can have the whole book in the summarization of my own words, which I think people wanted more than anything. I opened my book with the torture scene. I opened the book with when I was strapped down naked and beaten and tortured by guards. A true story. I mean, I get the chills whenever I do this thing. Do what I'm doing now, and that's reliving some of my earlier life. And when you're getting beaten and you're tortured and you're thinking back and you think, where did it all start? Where did your own life start? I mean, you're in desperation. You're in the hole. You're in prison. You'll learn about that later in the chapters coming up. And you think you're going to die. And you also wonder, what happened? You went from being a multi-millionaire to being in a prison cell contemplating suicide. So I'm going to go right to it. I grew up in the Bronx, New York. I grew up in the Bronx under the Throgs Neck Bridge. I say under the Throgs Neck Bridge. I was in Locust Point, a little 4-block area at the end of Throgs Neck, at the end of East Tremont Avenue in the Bronx. There were little bungalow houses. My dad built the house. The whole house was about 1,200 square feet. That's the house, 1,200 square feet. And we had 5 young people, me and 4 brothers and sisters, a dog, and my mother and father. There were only 2 bedrooms and a basement that was finished somewhat. But that's where the workshop was. That's where the laundry room was. That was like, if you want to call them a playroom, stuff like that. And then upstairs, you had the kitchen, a little living room, and my mom and dad's room. And it ended up being my oldest sister's room. My dad was a construction worker, so he made the attic into 2 rooms, if you want to call it that. You couldn't stand up as an adult. You had to stand up in the middle where the point of the house went, because if you couldn't stand up here because it was too tall. But as kids, we thought that was great anyway, so we lived up there, and the stairs that went up into the attic, if you want to call it that. And my dad built that. That's where we lived. My brother and I had one room. My younger sister, my just oldest sister, had the upper room. And my sister downstairs had her own room. She was the oldest, so she got her own room. I guess that's how they did that. The neighborhood was Irish, Catholic, mostly, and Italian, German, that kind of ethnicities. It was a pretty dominant, a kind of a Caucasian or a white area, if there is what they call a white area in the Bronx, New York. It was down off the Throgs Neck Bridge in a little place called Locust Point. And there were 4 blocks. And those 4 blocks, it was our blocks. I mean, you couldn't come in there. I wouldn't care who you were, what color you were. If you came in that area, we knew who you were, and we didn't like it, whether it's people coming to fish off the jetty. It's funny, thinking back into this chapter and thinking about my neighborhood. Where I grew up was at the end of the East River, under the Throgs Neck Bridge. And we had a thing called Locust Point Civic Association. And they had a basketball court, and then they had a beach that went out into the East River, at the end of the East River. It's just the start of the Long Island Sound. And we thought we were living in like a country club. And on the other side of a jetty sticking out, there was a sewer. Literally raw sewer would sometimes come out. Raw sewer shit would be floating in the water. We were swimming in this shit, thinking, wow, we living in this great area. We had the water. That's what we thought as young kids. I mean, we had a raft they had out there anchored down so people can go out and swim, get to the raft. It was really kind of weird. I mean, they had like these like wooding stanchions around the beach area supposed to keep seaweed and crap out and everything. It never did. It was kind of like disgusting when you think about it. But that's where we lived, and we thought we were living in high cotton. And that's just the Bronx. That's the way you lived. In my neighborhood, we had like I said, gangsters, and we had a family. I call them the O'Reilly family. Man, what a tough Irish family. They'd make you laugh, man. They had a mother who would kick your ass. Funny story, and I'll never forget this story. We're playing football in the street, and it's a tough family. This is a tough Irish family, and she comes in the old station wagon, with the muffler coming down, and she's driving down. We hear it. We're playing football. We used to play football in the streets, from telephone pole to telephone pole. And the sewer that was in the middle of the street was the 50-yard line. We'd even take spray paint and do that and mark the street up. But this is where we're playing football. Now, we played rough two-touch in there. We'd bang you into a car. Literally, you'd go flying off a car. We played a rough game in the streets, roughing you up. And I was always a little guy. I'm not this big guy you see now. I was a little guy. And when I say little, when I went into service, I was 132 pounds. Think of that. Soaking wet, I was 132 pounds. Now I'm 245 pounds. But anyway, so we're in the street, and I'm playing with Tommy Joe, and we just play football. Our old Ruts, the mother, comes rolling up, and the old station wagon with the stuff on the side, old station wagon, the wood on the sides. And she comes up, and she goes, Tommy Joe, get home, put the lights on. He says, fuck you, tells his mom like that. I'm like, whoa, these people are crazy. She goes, Larry, I got a football. She goes, Larry, give me the football. I says, I got the football. Tommy goes, don't give me the football. Give me that football, Larry. Don't give me the football. I throw the football in the air to get out of there. This was a great family, but they were crazy. They had a lot of fun. They were really a good family that struggled like everybody in this neighborhood. My next door neighbor was in the mob, literally. Then 3 down, I had my buddy Ronnie. His family was down there. Now on the corner was Mr. Knapp, who worked for the telephone company. A couple of houses in, and they had like different kind of houses. They weren't all like the same house like you see today. They were all little, big, all small in the sense of anybody thinking about a house. And next you had the DeGeneros, and next you had the Nancy Petrolacs, the Petrolacs. Then you had the Duffys, who were both school teachers. One was a principal, and I think they were both principals. The mother and the father were principals. And to this day, Johnny got killed in a bar fight. And he was a big kid. He got killed and stabbed in a bar fight. And next to them, you had my neighbor, which was the Zeals. Still contacting him today. I know him well. And then us. And then next to me, Mr. Landy was in the mob. And then they had the Chicago's on the next house. Then we used to call it the Greek houses. They were newer houses, were built where we used to play in the area there. It was like a real weeds. I remember we used to build forts. We were little kids. Now we're talking in the 60s, late 60s. We used to build forts. And in the fort, we'd like have car seats as cushions, kids building stuff. And there were rats in there because the next day you'd see rat excrements in there. You didn't even know. You just brush it away and let down. It's like it was dirt on your car seat that you used in it. We made forts that were so elaborate. We used to tap into the electric along the bridge. That's what we used to do. We were just innovative young kids. We were always doing something. And in my neighborhood, there were some famous people that came from. Michael Kay, who's the announcer for the New York Yankees. He grew up right around the corner. He's a friend of mine, good friend of mine. I used to go into his house all the time. I used to go into his house, his sister Debbie, and went to her wedding. And I know Michael very well. And also Dougie Marone. Dougie Marone used to like my sister, my little younger sister Donna. Dougie Marone is the coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars football team. He ended up going to Syracuse, and he ended up playing professional football in the NFL. Big kid when we were kids. Big kid, Dougie. I remember partying with these guys, all of us, hanging out. I got some great pictures, and we'll put them up as well on the Instagram. So that'd be cool to see those kind of guys in our neighborhoods. And who'd you have there? You had my dad was a construction worker. My dad worked for Local 28, which is a tin knockers. They put in the duct work for buildings. My dad worked on the World Trade Center. That's when we thought we were doing good. But that's when I got introduced to, if you want to really call it the mob. My dad was a foreman on the job for Brooks Sheet Metal. Brooks Sheet Metal had the World Trade Center. You're talking about good construction, the Union construction. They built the World Trade Centers. At the time, the two world's biggest buildings, 110 stories high, And that whole building, that whole project was started in 1968 and it was finished in 1972. And you think they put those two buildings up in 4 years. Think of the coordination putting the two biggest buildings in the world in Manhattan all the way up. And I have pictures of me wrapped with a rope around, going on the 103rd floor, like crawling up to the edge and looking out. And you could actually feel the building sway up there. It's kind of crazy, but you can feel that. And it's we used to go on the roof. My dad was the construction. He was the head. He was one of the foremans on that job. And I used to go with him. He used to deliver the payouts. Now, you can't get anything done in New York City without being mobbed up. And what I mean by mobbed up, you're making payments. There's no way you're going to do it without making payments. And sure enough, my dad used to... I remember he used to bring home envelopes. It was on a Friday. And there would be about 4, 5, 6, 7 envelopes. And he always carried them in the top. He used to wear a flannel shirt, those flannel shirts. He's bald like me, but he had the hair around. We used to call it the horseshoes. And he used to keep the envelopes in his pocket, and I would go on them with rounds. Now, this is 1972. I'm 11 years old, 71, 72. And I used to go with him, and he used to go to the Q Lounge and drop off an envelope in there. And I remembered all the mobsters said, "Hey, kid, come here." I used to go into the bar. I used to go to the Triangle Bar was on Burr Avenue. What a memory. I'd never forget. And Triangle Bar was on Burr Avenue in New York City under the L. And this is in the Bronx. And it was called the Triangle Bar. It was literally like a triangle right on a corner of a street. And in there, the bookie was named Vinny Tremomuno. Vinny Tremomuno was the bookie. And now, it was so funny back then. This is in the 70s. This is... Godfather came out in 72. So this is pre-even Godfather days. And right around that time, I started really understanding. My dad used to pay envelopes to certain guys he'd meet at that bar. That was main meeting place. And when we did that, I would go with him, and the old timers would give me quarters and say, "Hey, kid, play the machine." And they'd be playing the old pinball machines. Bing, 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 bing. You know, they didn't have these new stuff they have today where you hit buttons. It was the old pinball machines, and I would be playing them all the time with the old mobsters. And "Hey, kid, your dad's a good man. Listen to your dad," all that. And I was, I knew my dad gambled, and he was a small bettor, but he would bet, and I always wanted to do that. So it was like a big deal back then. It wasn't like it is today with computers and the internet and gambling all over the place. There was no places legal for gambling except Las Vegas. That's it. Even Atlantic City wasn't there yet. Atlantic City came in the mid-70s. It didn't come until then. So here we are in the bar, and I want to place a bet. Never forget this. The bookie had what they call flash paper. They can write, on it and keep the paper, but if they even touched a little light to it, it would like flash away. It'd be gone. Well, I remember my first bet I ever made. It was funny too, because he didn't just do it right there sitting out. Because they'd have squads. They call them the vice squads that come in and bust people for bookmaking, loan sharking, and prostitution. It was like they had whole teams like that. But they were all paid off too. So this is the Triangle Bar. You talk about like the little hub. And if you remember any movies, like kind of like Goodfellas, where they would be in that one bar. And they would all be in that the place there. And I forget even the name. And I used to know the name of that bar. So anyway, it wasn't the Gemini. That was another one. But anyway, so here we are in the bar. And I wanted to make my first bet. So I said, "Dad, I want to make a bet." And he goes, "Okay." And I remember I bet the Giants. The New York team. I was in New York, and the Giants were playing, I think, Dallas, because that was a big game, and you get to watch it. Again, now you were telling, but this is before ESPN, before sports channels. We only had 7 channels, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, and 11, and then 13 was WPIX. That's all we had in New York City. Imagine around the other country. But the main networks, ABC, NBC, see, there was not even a Fox network. But they would have the football game on, and this is, so you get to watch the football game. That was like a big deal. So I wanted to place my first bet. So I placed a $5 bet. In bookmaking lingo, 1 time is a $5 bet. So if you want to bet a 20-time bet, that's $100. So, and you have to give 10% VIG. The VIG is the interest. So let's say you want to put, I'm just going to give a roundabout number. If you want to put $100 on the Giants, you would have to give him $110. If you win, you get back $200 and your VIG, so you get back $210. Got it? So you gave him 110, you got back 210. You don't make money on the VIG. Let's say you lose the game, you got to give him $110. So that's where they make the money. If they got $100 on this team and $100 on this team, this $100 pays this guy off, they make $10. Now multiply that by $100,000 or $1 million. Think of $100,000. That's $10,000 they make without even gambling. Just being the middleman, passing money. That's what a real bookie is. Real bookies don't gamble. A bookie is not a gambler. A bookie is a businessman who makes money off of the VIG. And I learned that very early, and that's why I always wanted to get into that business. And then I eventually learned from Mac, and I'll get in that a little later. But it was great. So I placed my first bet. And I remember we go into the bathroom, and we sit in the bathroom, and he puts his foot up against the door. This is how it is. And he goes, "What do you want, kid?" He's got the cigar hanging out. This guy's out of Central Casting. He's got the hat, and he got the cigar sticking out of his mouth. "Hey, kid, what do you want?" I said, "Give me one time on the Giants. -3 it was. Giants -3. Writes it down. You're good." I give him $5.50. They don't not take that 50 cents. They take it. $5.50. That was my first bet ever made illegally in a bookmaker, and it was at the bar where all the hustlers were. That bar was where everybody was. That was the creme de la creme in the bars, and it was really, really amazing to see how they did that. The bookies and how they ran it. Tell you what kind of knock-around bar it was. It was just a crazy bar. We go in there one time, and there was a guy there who couldn't read. Think of this. He couldn't read. You couldn't give him a note, and he couldn't read it. Guys I guarantee everybody on this channel can read, because you're here, you find it, you read my titles, whatever, you can read. Now, this is a man can't read, but this is back in the 70s, early 70s. He can't read. So what do the guys in the bar do? They knock around bars. There's a bank across the street. So they give this guy a note, and they say, "Hey, go cash this for, we need to get money. Just go give the note to the teller and get cash." So the guy walks across the street, gives the note. The ladies are looking at him. Everybody's looking at him. All of a sudden, the manager comes over. What is it? The guys in the bar gave this guy a note that said, "This is a stick-up." Of course it wasn't, and the cops came, and of course they knew the guys in the bar were fucking around with him, and they let him go. They didn't even do anything. And I think about that today. Could you imagine that today? That never happened today. The guy, everybody would be in jail, and that's just the way it would be. It was really funny. I got such a kick out of that. It made me laugh. And I learned about knock around guys in that place. They had a guy there. That's how I first met the Purple Gang. I was a little older, and the Purple Gang was in there. Now, if you never heard of the Purple Gang was a real mean gang back in those times in the 70s. And there was a guy who used to be in the Purple Gang, and he always had a bag on the top of the bar. And in that bag, he used to keep a .45 gun. So he sees me always in the bar. He knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody. I'm a knock-around kid now. Now I'm a little older. I'm a knock-around kid. And he's starting to talk to them, and I'm asking questions. I'm inquisitive, but not like, "Oh, I'm a rat." That wasn't even thought of back then. So here I am just talking to the guy, and he goes, "You want to make extra money?" Now, where I grew up, we used to gamble. We were kids gambling heavy in the streets. We would either play sports up at the field. We had a field near the bridge. Now, remember I told you the Throgs Neck Bridge goes over to Long Island, actually to Willets Point. So it would go over to Fort Totten, Willets Point. And we used to play either under the bridge, play stickball. I made with my first girl under the bridge. Or we'd be up near the front of where the bridge is. They had like a field there. We used to call it the field. And we used to drink, and we used to get big vats, like a big vat. Stick packets of iced tea mix, bottles of vodka in there, put a hose in there. We'd get a hose from the bridge. Hose where we'd even the people up the bridge, they knew we were knocking around kids. They had a basketball court up there, and they would we'd put water in there, mix it up, and drink that. That would be our drink for the night. And we were crazy. We would All kids, 15 years old, drinking, partying like you wouldn't believe. Now you got to remember, 18 was the drinking limit back then. It wasn't 21 like it is today in most places. It was 18. But we were up there. We used to go. They had a basketball court up there. Matter of fact, one time, my dad in '72 gets, after the World Trade Center, he gets laid off. We had no money. I mean, we were a family with 5 kids, a mom and dad, no money. We were what they call latchkey kids too. When my dad was out working, my mom would be working or sleeping, coming from the night shift as a nurse. And we were what they call latchkey kids today. We really wasn't supervised at all. But anyway, so my dad got laid off. I remember we had no money for sneakers. And we were poor. And I literally played basketball in my slippers. In my slippers. And they ended up with grease, and I ripped them up in no time. And this is trying to play basketball to hang out up at the bridge, because our family didn't have money. We were poor, you know. I don't mean, we were lower middle class, if you want to call that. And in times we become very poor because my dad got laid off and there was no money coming in. And that's just the way that was back in those days. And trust me, you didn't even know you were poor. You knew you had nothing. Or like during Christmas time, you didn't get a bunch of presents. You got a shirt, maybe a shirt, or a football for you and your brother to share. Or a basketball that year, or a hockey helmet, or a football helmet. Whatever you got one item. You didn't get like kids today. They got tons of items under the thing. Listen, I know I have a grandson who gets everything, a granddaughter. It's totally different today than it was when I grew up, and that's just the way it was. I mean, when you're little and young, that's the way it was. It was a crazy place. And, we had no money, and that's the way it was. So in 1972, we used to go, I was also an altar boy. And this is a part I really didn't want to bring up, but I'm going to tell the audience the truth, and obviously always the truth. But I was thinking of skipping this part of it. In 1972, I was 11 years old, and I was an altar boy. And we used to go to confession. I was Catholic. I went to Catholic school. I went to St. Francis de Chantal. It's a little school, Catholic school in the Bronx. And sure enough, I was an altar boy. And one time after church, the priest said, stay here. And he comes in here. And I was getting changed in the back. The other kid left. And we used to like to get funerals or weddings, because afterwards you used to make money. And you used to actually, the family would give you $10, $20. Whatever it was a big money back then, and we were kids. Now this is even before I was even a real teenager. I was 11 years old. And the priest said, you could take it all off. And I go, what do you mean, take it all off? And he came up to me, and I was standing up right where you change your clothes, and he took down my pants. And he gets down on his knees, and he proceeds to blow me and give me a blowjob. I'm at the age where I'm just learning about even sex, not even, getting a hard on at night and jerking off. So I was 11 years old, just understanding, not knowing it. And he proceeds to get me excited and blows me. And then he gets up. Man, I hated even doing this part of this video. But people got to know life. And so he does what he does to me. And after he does that, he starts getting up. And right when he started to get up, he started unbuckling his pants. I took off out of that fucking church like you wouldn't believe. And I'm sure I've been with psychologists and everybody else, and they'll say, hey, that fucked you up for your life. That wasn't good. I mean, you lost all authority, respect. How do you tell a priest no? I totally understand the scandals when they say, people didn't want to tell. The priests in our neighborhood were revered. They were revered. And you couldn't say anything against them. It wasn't before computers, before anybody knew. To this day, we found out later there were multiple people who were abused in my neighborhood that I even know. And I think about that, and I said, man, these scumbags, taking advantage. Maybe that's why I have such disdain, and that's why I really hate child molesters or people who take advantage of people. I can't stand that. It fucking drives me. I want to fucking kill somebody. And obviously, I'm getting over all that kind of stuff. So after being abused, I'll never forget. I used to my mom used to let us go to church alone. And we'd bring back the the bulletin to show we went to church. So I never went. My mom used to give us $1 to put into the basket. And are you fucking kidding me? We would go up to the church. We'd run into the church, see who the priest was, because your mother would sometimes ask you what father did the mass. We'd look who the priest was. As a matter of fact, when I used to see that fucking scumbag, it used to give me the willies, and I didn't even want to run in. But we'd go in and we'd take the program, the mass bulletin they call them, and we'd run out. And there was a shop down at the end. We used to call it the Wop Shop. And we'd go into the Wop Shop, and we'd wait out front of the Wop Shop until an older kid, 18, 19, 20, whatever his age was, he was legal. We'd say, hey, can you buy us a quart of beer? Quart of beer was 69 cents. Never forget that. A quart of beer was 69 cents. And we used to give him the $1. We all stole the money that we used to get from the church or our parents, our allowance, or whatever you thought you could get. Hustled, shoveled driveways, mowed a lawn. What lawn? We only had the hand mowers back then. But we do whatever did. Rake of somebody's leaves. You did whatever you could. And when we did that, we'd get $1. But every time my mother used to give us $1, we'd go to the Wop Shop. Now, the Wop Shop was a little store right next to the Little League, next to the school and church. And it was a little Italian store. We called it the Wop Shop, where it had literally penny candies. I come from the area where you can buy for 1 penny, you can buy a barrel. The root beer barrels, they were a penny. You'd get 5 for a nickel. And we used to get stuff like that. We used to go in there and get whatever, a soda or something, which was so cheap. It was, now you look back, but a quart of beer, we used to get that too. And it was 69 cents. We'd take our quart of beer back to the neighborhood. Walk down Pennyfield Avenue, which it came up from where I live, go to Pennyfield Avenue and then go into Locust Point and up the field, and we'd be drinking and getting drunk as little kids. That's what we did. It drove us nuts. And that's, a lot of people who know me, and I'm talking to my, who wrote the book when we was Peter Golenbach, great guy. Psychologists who've met me and talked to me since and said, that was the start of your career. That's when you started getting to be a rough kid. And I'm going to end this part right here. I'm going to continue chapter 1. Next Thursday, you'll get that. And I want you to know this has been a great experience. Again, you know about our merch in the links below. You see it right here. I literally use my merch. That's not a joke. All the stuff, you can look into the links below. We're going to do stuff. I'm going to be on Twitch. I'm going to be on a couple other platforms. I'm going to do the more videos on the gaming, more videos on. I have a great series planned. I'm just going to tell a quick one now. I'm going to be doing my prison cooking show. And I developed the whole show. It's going to be me cooking with exactly the way I did it in prison, with the exact same stuff I did in prison, meaning the stingers, the little cut razor blades. Show you how we all did it. And actually cook a meal and have a special guest come in and eat it. That's going to be a fun story. I'm getting people to help me with that. We're going to have special guests, ex-felons. We're going to get some celebrities. I think I can get some to come and actually sit down, and I'll be telling stories with them, and they'll be telling stories. One of my guests I'm going to have is Cruiserweight Champ of the World back then was Mark Randazzo, owns Randazzo's Restaurant. He's a great friend of mine. He volunteered to come do it and eat my pasta. Because the first one we do is going to be prison pasta, and that's coming right after the series is over. It's totally technically over, but I'm redoing these first series for everybody. Thanks, everybody. Love you. Really do. I love the support. Thanks very much. It means more than you know. And stay safe. Don't make the choices I made. And keep following us. Have a great day.